Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Beatrice and today I have for you a video review of C.S. Lewis's novel The Screwtape Letters. Now Lewis is now best remembered for his children's books, The Chronicles of Narnia, which I'm sure most of you would have at least heard of. But during his lifetime, he was an incredibly prolific writer and also a theologian, which many people don't know about. He wrote a number of books of Christian apologetics, most famously Mere Christianity, which is still such an important seminal text for so many Christians today. While I haven't read all of his books, I can tell you that The Screwtape Letters is probably one of my favourites, if not my favourite of his that I have read. And that's why I want to talk to you about it today. First of all, The Screwtape Letters is interesting for me from the perspective of looking at genre, because it's sort of at the intersection of a novel and Christian apologetics. It is fictional and has a narrative, which is why it's often described as a novel, but it is also for Lewis a vehicle for discussing a series of theological issues. It takes the form specifically of an epistolary novel, which means that the story unfolds through a series of letters sent from Screwtape, a demon and successful administrator in the bureaucracy of hell, to his inexperienced nephew Wormwood. Through these letters, we experience the ups and downs of a normal human life. Wormwood is tasked with tempting a young man to abandon the Christian faith and become increasingly more sinful, and Screwtape writes to him to advise him how to do so best. The plot itself is not really the main focus of the Screwtape Letters, but, spoiler alert, in case you haven't read it and you don't want the plot spoiled, I would skip the next minute or so of me talking. I can reveal now, if you don't mind the spoiler, that the patient, the unnamed young man that Screwtape and Wormwood refer to as their patient, actually does die at the end of the novel, but we know that he has overcome temptation, so he goes to heaven, and that is obviously a disaster for Wormwood, whose task was to tempt him to sin, and he did not succeed. So it has a happy ending in that sense. But the most important thing about the novel is not the plot itself, but rather the fact that during the course of the patient's human life, the challenges, failures, and growth in faith that he experiences help Lewis to discuss issues such as war, love, pride, and friendship from a Christian point of view. Now remember, this book was first published in 1942, so right in the middle of World War II, and I believe the various chapters were first given as lectures, perhaps even radio lectures. I'm going to, not lectures, but rather they were given as radio talks, which I'm going to look that up, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So the kinds of issues that Lewis is discussing are closely related to the historical situation that he found himself in and that Britain found itself in, which was a time of war and a time when it would perhaps be easy to give in to despair and to lose hope in humanity. Now, there are many reasons why I love this book, but for the sake of brevity in today's video, I will focus on a few letters that I think are particularly perceptive. The passages I'm going to discuss with you today, I have also discussed in two Substack posts, the first of which was written a few weeks ago. I think it was at the beginning of Lent or something like that, and the second of these posts is coming out today as of when I'm filming this video, but it would have come out last week for you as you're watching this video. So do check that out. I will link my Substack in the description below. So throughout the Screwtape Letters, Lewis contrasts false and true virtues. This is something that I talk a lot about when I talk about Jane Austen, this idea of semblances of virtues versus true virtues, and I think it applies to Lewis as well. Screwtape warns that if the patient is allowed to cultivate true qualities of character, his faith will deepen, and of course from the point of view of a demon, that is not what he wants. But if he can be deceived into thinking that he is developing such qualities, while in fact he is practicing false virtues, false versions of them, then he will be drawn away from God, which is what they want. Two examples of this really stood out to me as especially interesting when I recently reread the Screwtape Letters, or rather I should say my husband read it out loud to me recently, and we were discussing the letters together as it was a reread for both of us. In letter 11, Screwtape discusses the purpose of laughter. I found this especially interesting as I'm really interested in the genre of comedy and in looking at the role of humour and laughter in novels and in literature in general. Screwtape warns Wormwood not to assume that laughter always works in the favour of the devil, whom Screwtape refers to as our father below. Flippancy, as he terms it, can lead to sin, as it can be a sign of someone not taking anything seriously or of making cruel jokes at someone's expense. However, if laughter comes from a real sense of fun, then it is dangerous for the purpose of Screwtape and the other demons. That is because, Lewis writes through Screwtape, fun is closely related to joy, and joy promotes charity, courage, contentment, and many other evils. Of course, here evils are things that are good for Christians, but remember we're seeing everything from the point of view of a demon of Screwtape. Lewis doesn't exactly spell this out perhaps, but we could also say that a true sense of joy is connected to the virtue of hope. So it is particularly good for Christians to actually have that sense of joy that is related to laughter. Another fantastic example of this kind of contrasting between true and false virtues is found in letter 14. Here, Screwtape explains to Wormwood how to utilize a false idea of humility to draw humans away from God. You may have heard of the concept of humility as not thinking of yourself at all, from Lewis's best-known work of non-fiction, Mere Christianity, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video. But he discusses this idea of humility as not thinking of yourself in the Screwtape Letters as well. Referring to the patient that Wormwood is trying to tempt, Screwtape suggests to his nephew, let him think of humility not as self-forgetfulness, but as a certain kind of opinion, namely a low opinion of his own talents and character. Some talents, I gather, he really has. Fix in his mind the idea that humility consists in trying to believe those talents to be less valuable than he believes them to be. By this method, thousands of humans have been brought to think that humility means pretty women trying to believe they are ugly, and clever men trying to believe they are fools. This allows the demons, Screwtape adds, to have the chance of keeping humans' minds endlessly revolving on themselves. God, Screwtape explains, wants man to rejoice in his talents and good works, to be so free from any bias in his own favour that he can rejoice in his own talent as frankly and gratefully as in his neighbour's talents. God wants us to love the true, the good, and the beautiful, precisely because these things are true and good and beautiful, and that is a wonderful thing, and we should rejoice in those things regardless of who created them. So the idea is that it's not bad for us to enjoy our own talents and to acknowledge them as talents, as long as we're also willing to acknowledge other people's talents as being wonderful things that come from the gifts that God gave us. But if the demons in this bureaucracy of hell can get humans to worry that they are not good enough, that they should castigate themselves endlessly for everything they do, then this can actually work to their favour, because they are making humans think they're being humble by doing so, whereas in fact they are making us self-absorbed because we think of ourselves and about ourselves endlessly. And they actually stop us from exercising the virtue of charity, which derives from a true kind of humility. I always feel that Lewis wrote this chapter for me every time I reread the Screwtape Letters, because I know how much this is a temptation that I have. I'm always tempted to think of my own abilities and my own talents as not being good enough, and I kind of have this tendency to exercise this sort of false humility, and this is one of the wonderful things about the Screwtape Letters, which is that Lewis touches on so many different kinds of temptations and evils that inevitably in one of those letters you will find something that feels as though it's speaking to you, the reader, directly, like Lewis wrote it for you, and it forces us to confront our own flaws, but it does so in a way that is still full of hope. It is not hopeless. Lewis clearly believes that we can overcome these temptations. There are many other fascinating aspects, of course, to the Screwtape Letters. For example, the way in which Screwtape reveals how the bureaucracy of hell is organized. I found that fascinating. Or how hell itself is described by Screwtape as a place where there is neither silence nor music, but just incessant noise. I thought that was fascinating. And what perhaps is the most revealing thing about the nature of evil in the Screwtape Letters is that Screwtape and the other demons can't work out what God's ulterior motive is in creating, loving, and ultimately saving mankind through Christ. I thought that was so well done. And that comes out in the chapter on laughter as well, where Screwtape tells Wormwood that he can't figure out the real cause of joy for humans. He knows that joy is a phenomenon that happens for humans. He can recognize it. He can spot it when it's about to happen. He knows the circumstances that might cause a sense of joy, but he can't figure out what the real deep cause of joy is, for the same reason that he can't figure out why God would sacrifice his own son to save mankind. To the demons, in this bureaucratic kind of hell that Lewis comes up with through his imagination, the demons just can't work out why God would do such a thing. They believe that he must have an ulterior motive, that he must be manipulating humans somehow, because the demons just can't conceive of that kind of unconditional love. And I thought that was so perceptive and so telling about what evil really is, and it is the absence of the belief that God really can love humans that much. So as a whole, the novel manages at once to contain an engaging narrative and to make us reflect about how evil operates, what temptations we must overcome, and how God helps us to overcome those temptations. It is both great literature and a great work of popular theology. If you haven't read it before, I highly, highly recommend it, and I highly recommend that you do so now in this post-Lenten period. I think this would have been the perfect book to read during Lent, but also right after it. Now, I'm currently on DL Sayers marathon that I've been on for the past 8-9 months or so. I've been making my way through Sayers's Peter Wimsey novels, her detective novels, all featuring this character of Lord Peter Wimsey, which are delightful. I highly recommend that you read those as well. And I believe I've read about 3/4 of them now. The next one I have to read is meant to be her best one, which is The Nine Tailors, and after that is Gaudy Night, which is my personal favourite. I've read that one once before, and then there are a couple after that. And once I'm completely finished reading those novels, I'll probably make a video ranking all of them. But after that, I'm seriously considering going into a C.S. Lewis marathon to reread some of the books by him that I've read before and enjoyed, but also to finally read the ones that I've never read before, of which there are still quite a few. I know that I definitely want to reread The Abolition of Man, which is brilliant, and I should make a video on that as well. I also want to reread The Four Loves, which is the first one I read and really enjoyed, and The Great Divorce, which is brilliant as well. And I would really love to read for the first time Till We Have Faces, which is meant to be a fantastic, fantastic novel. So if you would be interested in more Lewis videos, please do let me know. When I recently did a poll, or rather one of those quizzes on the community tab, asking people to guess what today's video was going to be on, one of the options was Brideshead Revisited, and I think quite a few of you would have liked that to be the video that I was going to make. So I'm also thinking of rereading Brideshead, because I haven't read it in a couple of years, maybe even 3 years, and then making a video on that. For those of you who haven't read about it, or haven't heard of it rather, it's Evelyn Waugh's best known novel, and it is quite brilliant, so maybe I should make a video all about that as well. So let me know in the comments below if any of these options sound interesting, or if there are any videos that I haven't made and you would like me to make, as I'd be more than happy to make them. Now, I think I can hear my baby crying. I have my mother looking after both kids right now, so I should probably get back to them and see how they are doing. So I will stop today's video here for now. And as always, I wish you a wonderful weekend, and I will see you in my next video.